Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And this week we're focusing on Munich, one of Steven Spielberg's more dramatic films, very tense film. And I have Jake from SiftPop here joining me for this episode. Jake, thank you so much for coming aboard.
Thanks for having me back.
And before we get started with the show, would you like to shamelessly plug anything for all of our lovely viewers?
Yeah, I guess, just keep a watch out on SiftPop. That's where I do all my reviews. Usually have a few a month that I'm doing. I think I've got like 5 or 6 coming up this month. Just did Welcome to Wrexham. Gonna have by the time this drops, I'll have a little thing on the Great Mouse Detective
Oh,
coming up
nice.
for my monthly series. I have The Stranger, Ticket to Paradis, Tales of the Jedi, and the remake of All Quiet on the Western Front coming
Oh,
out in
very
the next
nice.
couple weeks. So you can find that on my Twitter, or on the SiftPop Twitter, and follow me at Jake_BOURGEOIS.
There we go. And gotta get some Radigan. Radigan.
So underrated.
I used to watch that so much as a kid.
So good.
Great Mouse Detective. Nice choice. For those of you who have not turned into Welcome to the Wasteland before, this is a 3-segment show where we start things off with some coming attractions, and then we get into our feature of the week, which is Munich, and then have some recommendations for all of you lovely people watching and listening. So, starting off with our coming attractions for the week of October 21st, we didn't pick Black Adam, but Black Adam is indeed coming out and tracking to be one of the biggest, probably the biggest movie of October, and theaters sure need it.
Yeah, not much competition. That's
No.
for sure.
And then to talk about our 2 picks, so Jake, what are you most excited about coming out for this weekend?
So, I am really excited about Ticket to Paradise. Rom-com starring George Clooney and Julia Roberts, who are a divorced couple who fly to paradise to try to stop their destination wedding of their daughter, played by Caitlin Dever, to a boy she just met. And it's one of those films that, like, you see the trailer and it spoils the entire movie.
Yep.
So if you haven't watched the trailer, just don't. Just know that it's a rom-com. It's going to do rom-com things. But it looks like a really good time. And the main reason is you've got just a charismatic trio of Clooney, Roberts, and Dever leading the way. And that just immediately had me interested and had me hooked. I don't care if I know basically every beat. I'm going to sit there and enjoy my, hour and 45 minutes.
Absolutely. And that was definitely my first reaction, is like you watch the trailer and just like they give you every beat from like even the second act like turn kind of thing. And then of course I don't think they show you a ton from the 3rd act, but at least they do show you like, hey, they seem to be getting along. But it's hard to say no to George Clooney and Julia Roberts. So I'm still excited to see it, and by the time we're recording, I'll be seeing it the next day. And obviously, when this drops on Friday, it'll be out for all of you to check out. Now, the film I'm most excited about coming out this weekend, which I do get to see in New York City on a special trip with Robert, Rowan, and Foster from SiftPop, finally get to meet some of the SiftPop folks in person, is going to see the Banshees of Inisherin. And this is Martin McDonagh's latest film, who did some amazing work within Bruges and 7 Psychopaths and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And we're going back to Ireland with some Irish people, and we have Colin Farrell and we have Brendan Gleeson both back in this first time they're back together since In Bruges, and I'm so excited for this movie. I love the chemistry that two of those actors have, and I love McDonagh's sensibilities. And I love this is the first opportunity to actually see a film done properly in Ireland from him, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. So, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts, Jake? Are you excited for Banshees of Inisherin?
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about the Ireland angle there, but yeah, I am. I am also really excited. It's pretty even with Ticket to Paradise because In Bruges is one of my favorites. Absolutely love that movie. Three Billboards is great, so obviously I'm
Mhm.
in for anything McDonough does. Um, the only reason I gave Tickets to Paradise here, just being totally transparent, the
Yeah,
only reason Tickets to Paradise got the edge is I know I'm going to be able to see it
yeah.
immediately at my AMC in Iowa. Whereas, when exactly Banshees is gonna, make its way here is a little more of a dicey proposition. But the second it comes there, I will be buying my ticket to see it because it looks fantastic.
Yeah, because the thing that's very true. Because if I wasn't making a trip to New York City this weekend, I probably wouldn't be seeing it. Because like I can't imagine that it's going to be coming to any of the AMC's near me in South Jersey. So I'm going out of my way to go see it. And we're even doing a double feature. We're also seeing Black Adam. So
Yeah,
interesting double feature.
yeah,
Very, very different.
yeah.
But that's our coming attractions, and I'm interested to see how the box office shakes out. I really am interested to see how much Black Adam makes this weekend.
Yeah, because I'm DC's just hit or miss for me. Like, I enjoy most of the ones I go see, but I'm at the point where I don't see everything. Like, I never, Aquaman just didn't interest me as much with some, and I don't know. It just looks like The Rock doing his Rock thing in a DC movie, and I don't see everything The Rock does either. So it's not one that I'm super excited about, and I think I tweeted something to that effect. It looks like The Rock, doing his thing in a DC movie as opposed to what the character's supposed to be. And I got some decent response to that. So it'll be interesting to see how the audience comes out on that one. So
Yeah, because like I'll admit, I don't know much about Black Adam, so I wouldn't really be able to tell you,
either
like,
guy.
know the difference between The Rock just doing The Rock versus is this really what Black Adam's like? But I'm in it for the Pierce Brosnan.
There you go.
I want some
There you
Doctor
go.
Fate and Hawkman, and some of those other things that might be happening in the movie, apparently. But we shall see. But we're not here to talk about a DC movie. We're not even here to talk about a Martin McDonough film. We are here to talk about Steven Spielberg, who I am now reached 2005. And I feel like Munich is the last film in a bit of a very specific period of Spielberg's career from 2001 to 2005, where he had AI, Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, Munich, um, whatever the War of the Worlds. He was on a pretty impressive streak, and yes, I left the terminal out of there, which I thought was fine. I
Yeah, it's
enjoyed
fine.
it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like he was on the same level as the rest of these films, and then he took a couple years off and made Kingdom of the Crystal Skull,
Mm.
so which I'll be talking about next week. But Munich is after the Black September capture massacre of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Olympics. 5 men are chosen to eliminate people responsible for the fateful day. And so, like, this is a historical thriller focusing on a group of kind of off the books operatives for the Israeli government. And those operatives include our main character, played by Eric Bana, who was so big then,
Yeah.
That was peak Eric Bana time.
Yes.
This was early Daniel Craig time.
Mm.
Kieran Hines, who I feel like has been a pretty consistent character actor.
I think
Um,
this is the first thing I remember him from, though. So I didn't look up what he did before this, but then he goes into Harry Potter, which is obviously after this when he
mhm. Yeah, because
pops up
I
there.
remember him from There Will Be Blood, which was still 2 years after this,
Mm.
because he was like Daniel Day Lewis's right hand man, and like you get some Jeffrey Rush in here too, which I love me some Jeffrey Rush. But this film, and even like uh, Mateo Almeric and Michael Lonsdale. So like, there's some interesting smaller roles in this film too. It's a Spielberg film, so you should expect that. But this feels different than most Spielberg films because like this is dark and like there isn't even hope really in this film, which
No.
is different because like even Schindler's List, which at the end you still have like he saved all these people, even Saving Private Ryan, spoiler alert, made for a 20 plus year old movie. But like this doesn't feel like there's a happy ending. It just this is a very different kind of tone, I feel like, from Steven Spielberg, and I respected it.
Yeah, that sort of what one of the things that sort of stood out to me when it came to the direction. I had sort of the same sort of comparison in my head between this and um, Schindler's List for slightly different reason.
Mhm.
Not the hope thing definitely is there. It's the weird, like you said, there's the weird thing about Schindler's List feeling like a whole more hopeful movie, which I definitely agree with there, and we'll get into why probably later. But the other thing where I sort of made the comparison is this film is more visceral
Yep.
it's in its violence. It is a much more violent movie than Schindler's List, than Saving Private Ryan, which I didn't even think of when I was watching it, than anything else I think he's ever made. And I think that's very purposeful, especially as we get towards the end and you sort of see the impact of what
Mhm.
that's had on uh, characters that remain.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Like the word visceral is very true. There is a very specific feel and experience that you have watching this film. And I feel like what I was going to say, like, this is brutal. Like, the way that the violence is shot, because, like, I'm not even going to say action, because I feel like I think there's a big difference. And I don't know if many people, like, really point out this difference between action in a movie and violence in a movie because like something like a Sicario has violence in it. I wouldn't consider Sicario an action movie. Like there's just violent things that are happening. And this film is just brutal and violent. And because like there's no like excitement. It's not like a rousing action adventure. This is just they're straight up just killing people. There's brutal assassinations, and a lot of the situations are messy and imperfect. Like even like the first one of the early ones where like they shoot the guy with the milk
Yeah,
and like the milk goes everywhere and all that stuff. Um the woman assassin that they interact with and they do that like pump
yeah,
guns, and like she just walking around with these two holes in her chest, like
yeah,
picking up her cat. I'm like, what the hell is this? And like that was hard to watch. And then she starts like coughing and just like I'm just like, well, there we
yeah. But
go.
it was it was messy, but it avoids, I think, the traps you expect it to fall into with the messiness. Because, like, it'd been a while since I'd seen it, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But, like, I'd forgotten when they get to the part with the doctor where they're setting up the telephone bomb.
Yep.
Like, they set you up perfectly for, oh no, we've got a dead kid coming up.
Hmm.
And then they don't do it. But then they still go ahead with the bomb, and it works eventually and sets up other stuff. But I just love that there's the tension of, oh no, they're not gonna do the thing, and then they
Yeah.
don't do the thing. So you breathe, and then you're like, oh yeah, they still have a bomb to detonate here,
Which
and then you're right
that
back to
bomb
it.
is a lot bigger than it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And like the aftermath of that was tough because like you see people really messed up. And
Well, you're flipping those. You're
like,
flipping a couple of the bombs. So
oh
the
yeah,
telephone bomb, he was in the hospital for a bit before he
yep,
died. That just sent the glass to the one you're talking about is the hotel room where
yes.
Eric Bana's next door with the newlywed couple on the other side. That completely just blows apart rooms, and there's just blood and limbs
Which
everywhere.
this movie really has stakes and a sense of danger about it. Cause
Yeah,
like people, not everybody makes it out okay out of this film. And like this film never gives you any sense that it's not going to be that way. It's like this is a dangerous mission. And they set that up from the beginning. They're even just like, yo, are you willing to die for your country, more or less? And coming to grips with that kind of realization. And like one of the scenes that really got me was like Eric Bana's character flirting with that woman,
yeah,
and then him basically giving Kieran Hines' character a heads up about her, and then what happens?
yeah.
That was sad. That got me. And then, you know, it feels like one of those moments where you should be super happy when they get her, but it's so uncomfortable to watch. Like that's this kind of movie is that you have these expectations of like this whole entire thing's a revenge story. It's just like they did horrible things and we want to get revenge, but like the lengths that they have to go to and the brutality that they have to utilize and wind up utilizing leaves you feeling so conflicted and them feeling conflicted. And I think that's what makes this film so compelling and interesting to watch.
Yeah, I agree. Just sort of to touch on a couple points you just touched on, like it is really sad when uh, Hines' character is killed, and it's really the turning point for the movie in a couple of ways. Because one, it's they're not safe
Yep.
anymore. Like people know what they're doing now. They picked up on it. And the other thing it shows is that's the turning point where the characters go past the point of no return where
Mm-hmm.
they get off. Because this is going after her, which isn't part of the mission,
Yep.
is where the line is drawn, and it gets so much more messy, and you see the characters are totally gone, and the line is, which has been blurry before,
Yeah.
is just, it's gone. There is no line. The line doesn't exist. And like you said, something I think that the film does really well. Because going into the film, when you hear it's about uh, the mission from Israeli intelligence
Mhm.
to get the terrorists who perpetrated this horrible Munich attack that killed all these Jewish athletes, you're like, all right, we've got a rooting interest
Mhm.
and our heroes for this film. And you are you on their side? Maybe a little bit, but like we said, they do some terrible things that you can't. You're like, I don't think I'm okay with this. And there are
Yeah.
conversations that are had with them and uh, some Arab, uh, an Arab group that they're set up against, along with some just well, it actually doesn't really matter because anybody they're talking with about what they're doing is an interesting conversation and
Mhm.
makes it just more and more complex because you're like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. That's probably also a good point. Oh, I see where they're coming from.
It's
Oh, that's probably not great. Oh, yeah, how dare. And it makes it so much more complex by the end. And it's not just us, it's Eric Bana too.
Yeah, I think what makes it so complex and such a compelling watch too is they're like the men that are doing this are not the kind of men that live this life of espionage, and like Jeffrey Rush's character I feel like represents this
Yeah.
clandestine experience, and even like his final interactions with Eric Bana is setting up such an unfortunate thing, and you realizing like, was this worth it? And his interactions with Michael Lonsdale's character Drax from Moonraker, Bond villain.
Okay.
He is such an interesting character in this movie because he feels like he's in a whole other plane versus like Eric Bana's character, who's just he's on this job and it's a dangerous one, and he's convinced to do it out of like pride for his people and pride for Israel. And when it really comes down to it, he's in a web, he's in a
Yeah.
game that he's completely not ready for, and all these other players playing them like pawns.
Yeah, and I think it might be why I think Lonsdale might be my favorite character in the and performance in the entire movie because for him, it is just a business, and he does it in such a less slimy way than his son does. Like,
Mhm.
listen, there's a, it's uh, sort of like the Godfather Mafia type thing.
Yeah,
I mean, there's even a dinner that feels very
yeah.
Godfather-like. But it's a business for him. He respects everybody, but he's gonna play each other against each other
Yeah.
because that's how the business works. He has no qualms about that, but he respects what's going on, and he's the one who really sort of highlights the complexity. Because I don't know, would you call him a bad guy? Probably, but he's also probably, you could argue, the best guy in the entire movie. Because he's the only person who's not being fake or
Mhm.
lying or being untruthful or, like, you know, he's not angry or looking for revenge. He's very measured and he just
Mhm.
loves his family.
Yep.
That's all he does. It's there's so many interesting dynamics at play. That's what makes it this movie. I think that's this movie's strength is just that those complexities.
What I love so much too is like this is such a morally gray film that feels so different than so many other Spielberg films, because there's very few Spielberg films that have a moral gray area to it. Because like even think about like still Saving Private Ryan still it's like we're for the most part portrayed as the good guys. There are
Yeah,
moments
there are
where
moments. This whole thing is in
yeah,
gray.
and like obviously Schindler's List is shot in black and white and gray, but like there's no gray area about it. This is pure evil versus innocent people. So like I really appreciate that about this film, and Spielberg's able to deliver such tension in this film, and it's really impressive. And of course, Kaminsky's cinematography, and then John Williams scored this, right? I'm just
Yeah.
assuming. So,
But it's weird because the score, I don't know that the score stood out for me that
yeah,
much. But I don't think this movie doesn't. Like, I'm not sure if you're like, oh, this is a great John Williams score. I'm not sure if that would have been a real positive
mhm,
for the movie, if that makes sense.
yeah. And I feel like this film works more on the tension,
Mm,
the visceral nature of the filmmaking, and like even like the sound design and stuff like that. Because even like the
yeah.
like it's so subtle with like some of the guns they're using, and it just adds to like the discomfort, and those moments where it cuts to like the actual event and you see the brutality that went on. This film pulls no punches, and it'll definitely sit with you for a long time afterwards.
Yeah, that was, I think the the fact that it's able to maintain the along with, like we've talked about, the complexities that it's able to weave throughout and making everything so complex and not really judging everybody, but just laying it out there like we talked about. The other major strength is it's tense from the word go
Mhm.
to the very end. And it's a 2 hour and 45-minute movie.
Yeah.
And for me to come out of a 2 hour and 45-minute movie saying I didn't feel it's 2 hour and 45 minutes is a statement. But also, that's a long time to keep that tension going. And you
Yeah.
just have that pit in your stomach the entire time. Now, uh, I have mixed thoughts on sort of the cinematography, if we want to get to that.
Go ahead.
Did you have any other big strengths? Otherwise, I was going to use that to sort of go into a few issues that I had.
No, go ahead.
So, there are some things in the way the movie's shot that I think work well. Like you said, it's not a huge action scene, but when they're doing their missions, I never got lost. Good sense of place. That's great.
Mhm.
Fantastic stage draw. It's Spielberg. That's to be expected. Um, as far as the shots themselves, I think the muted tones worked really well, sort of with the shade of gray and that we've been talking about. It just sort of fits with the whole tone that they're
Yep.
trying to, and I really liked that, except for one area, and that's with the lighting of this movie, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Anytime there's window or sunlight and you get that whole washed out feeling when
Yeah.
there's sun, maybe it's, the photographer in me, but it just irked me. Is that just me being picky, or did you feel that the whole thing worked well?
I feel like just in general, the cinematography done by Kaminsky when it comes to like lighting
mm,
from like outside sources, it's like blinding, right?
mm.
And it's very artificial feeling. And like in some of his films, it works really well. Like it works interestingly in like Minority Report or like AI, where you have this like artificial world. But I guess when you're trying to make something very visceral and something very organic, uh, I think maybe it could feel a little off-putting and not really fit with like the tone of things.
It wasn't so much that it didn't fit with the tone. It it just bugged me. So I got distracted every time. I'm like, because I've had that. It just get, and it's probably a work thing, because I've had that with like photos. You're like, oh, the sunlight's there, and you get that halo, and it just
Mhm.
washes everything out. So I'm like, no, or you get a photo from, or you see, it even happens just on social media, where I see a photo that somebody else
Mhm.
takes from, it's like, like in a very different way. It's sort of a visual reaction that I have. It's just like, it just, I think it's one of those things that's a personal thing for me, where it just a pet peeve of mine that
Yeah,
takes me out.
which is understandable. And I think I remember seeing some of like this era of Spielberg first, and that the kind of lighting bothered me a lot when I first watched it. I guess I've been watching so much Spielberg lately, it kind of just like
Okay.
I've gotten past it. It's aesthetic choice and it's a creative choice, and I don't think it bothers me as much anymore.
Um, we've talked about some of our favorite characters, and like I said, Lombard's great.
Mhm.
Green, I think, is a little too slimy at times, but he was funnish.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Rush, like you said, was fun, and the Prime Minister for the 5 minutes she's in it. I think that
Yes.
performance is great.
Mhm.
But major problem, one of the other big problems I had that sort of keeps me from just absolutely loving this film is that I don't know that anybody. The closest maybe is Hines. I think I like Hines, but
Mhm.
I don't really know how many of the performances I liked. I don't. Bana didn't do much for me, and I don't think I really liked Craig all that much at all in this
Mhm.
movie, which was the latter was surprising to me. Uh,
I feel like Eric Bana's character is a bit of a blank slate
yeah.
kind of character. And it's that kind of film where it's just like they're trying to, because they're trying to have us get lost in this world of espionage too. And we have Banna's character to latch onto. But yeah, I really loved Kieran Hines' character, Carl.
Mm.
But you're right, there's not as many people to really latch on to in this film. And because like that's the thing about Spielberg films, and so many Spielberg films, you have characters that you just fall in love with. And this definitely isn't, because like even with like Schindler's List and especially Saving Private Ryan, there's characters that you fall in love with.
Mm.
They're great characters, and yeah, I don't know if these are some of his strongest characters in films.
Yeah, and it's not that because, like we said, it's such a weird dichotomy that the performances. I had some issues with some of the performances where I couldn't latch on because, like we said, the characters themselves are so interesting, and I still found that I was still intrigued by the characters themselves. It's just the performances. I don't really know what to do with that,
Yeah.
but it's just weird that as interesting as the characters are, the performances were a little lacking. So,
But
um,
anything else that you have that you wanted to talk about, Jake?
yeah, last big thing. It's not really a pro or negative, but it was just interesting for me to revisit because it was just one of those movies where, you know, I actually saw this when it, came out, not in the theaters, but on, home video or when it came on cable or
Mhm.
whatever. And it was one of those things where my dad must have shown it to me in like 2006. Well, he must have rented it actually. Cause I would have been like 12. And it's a
Mhm.
movie experience that sort of sticks with me. Cause it's one of those movies where we joked about later. He's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have. That's what I shouldn't have shown you then.
Yeah.
So there had been moments that I remembered, kind of invisible, but it was one that I wanted to go back to because I remembered, like we've talked about, what it was about in the broad strokes,
Mhm.
and I think that might be why just how much the movie lives in the gray stood out to me this
Mhm.
time around because I'm not sure that's something I recognized um, initially. I mean, oh my God, look what they just did to that guy,
Yeah.
and oh, well, what just happened there? So because when I watched it, when you're 12, you don't really. I don't think I could have fully realize the complexities of this movie. So I
Yeah.
think perhaps that's why the complexities sort of stood out on my second watch.
Yeah, I think I've gotten a bigger appreciation for this film. This is my second time watching it. And especially after watching all of his films up to this point and seeing his journey through all of this is an interesting kind of cap off because post this, it's interesting because I don't think he ever goes as bold and like dark like this again with the films that he's had since. So I think this is an interesting piece of Spielberg filmography to check out. But
Yeah, I would agree with that because like I'll defend some of the ones you're getting to later.
mhm,
I'll have to check back in with some because like that's perhaps the thing with the rest of these is they're solid films and like the best for me might be Lincoln, but it's
mhm,
and even this one I think just based on my thoughts, I think I had it 4 out of 5. I think I dropped it to 3.5. So it's still just solid, and I think that's been him lately. He's just solid. But yeah, I think that's what a lot of people have latched on is nothing when they sort of complain about the newer stuff if they do. Is
mhm.
there's not like you said, the bold the boldness, it's just oh yeah, that was good. Whereas this is like we've talked about, nothing we've ever seen
Yeah,
from Spielberg, and nothing uh, we'll ever see again, probably.
probably not. So, but those are our thoughts on Munich. Now it's time for us to give you all some recommendations to head away with. So, Jake, what would you like to recommend to the folks listening?
Yeah, so with it being Halloween, I'm not a huge horror person, but I try to
Mhm.
watch a couple horrors around this time. So I decided to rewatch a film I had watched in college. Uh, it's The Little Girl Who Lived Down the Lane. It is a 1976, probably less horror than I remembered,
Mhm.
more thrillery. Uh, but it stars young Jodie Foster. Same year, she made uh, Taxi Driver, and I like this movie a whole lot more than I did Taxi Driver. But it's just a really good like thriller. She's
Mhm.
fantastic. She plays this girl who's has to be sort of very self-sufficient because she lives in this house in this small little northeast town with her father that no one ever sees, and some of the neighbors get suspicious, and everything sort of
Mhm.
happens from there. And Jodie Foster is just it's so ridiculous how good she was at such a young age because she's playing this character who's sort of both obviously still young because she's 13,
Yeah.
but has to be wise beyond her years because she's very much left to her own devices and has to deal with problems that come up mainly in the form of a super icky Martin
Mhm.
Sheen as like the pedophile
Mhm.
oh, he's just so slimy, and those interactions they just make your skin crawl. But it's just a really great thriller that I don't know that a ton of people have seen. It's certainly by a
Mhm.
director who doesn't do much after this, but it's a fun thriller with a great performance from an actress that a lot of people know. So if you haven't seen The Little Girl Down the Lane, check it out. I think it's pretty easy to find at the moment.
I'll have to check that one out. So my recommendations, I have a couple here. So one film that I finally got off my watch list after some people convinced me that it was definitely worth checking out is Speed Racer, which I am a big fan of the anime. Like I used to watch that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And watching this film, there's some things that it's a bold movie and it really
Yes.
goes there. And I have to give it to the Wachowskis for going all in on it. There's some narrative things and stuff that I'm just like leaves a lot to be desired and it feels a little long, but
Yeah.
like it's exciting and interesting and very weird.
Oh
And
yeah. It's weird because like everybody, it's one of those movies where it's like that movie's no, it's a masterpiece, and
yeah,
it's just like you're both kind of right because there's flaws. And like you said, my dad is a huge fan of the old cartoon. Watched it a ton growing up, and like, I think he still likes. So we watched it. I think when it came out, and
mhm,
it's just fun. It's just one of those
yeah,
movies where if you're in for a ridiculous ride, you can have fun with it. And
yeah, it definitely is.
yeah, so
Now, a next one that I wanted to recommend is one that I watch pretty consistently around this time of year, and that is Little Shop of Horrors. And I love this movie so much. It is crazy and campy and weird, and it has great music. It has such like fun characters and crazy over the top performances, and it's just campy, creepy, and fun all at once. And I just love it so much.
yeah, I think the only version of that I've seen is I saw a high school production of it.
Nice.
But the songs are incredible. That's definitely a fun Halloween type. Uh,
Yeah. I just watched it for a movie night that I had.
uh,
So it was a fun time. And then my last one is one that I just watched, and this is called Slashback. And this is coming out on Shudder. It is a new like sci-fi horror kind of thing. It's about a group of Alaskan native girls in this like isolated little town up in Alaska, and this weird alien creature is like embodying like human skin sacks and polar bears and all kinds of stuff and wreaking havoc on the small town. And it's the group of young girls is so they're so much fun, and it has a lot of fun sci-fi kind of thriller elements to it. And it was just like an hour and 26 minutes. It was a fun time. I really enjoyed it. And it's probably going to be one of those kind of hidden gems that you find on Shudder. And I hope people check it out. So there's some recommendations for all of you. But Jake, thank you so much for joining me this time on Welcome to the Wasteland.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.